Ragnarok is here, and I have been eagerly awaiting its arrival. Back in May of this year, Sony Santa Monica announced the accessibility features to the sequel to 2018's God of War, and it was a lot. It looked like Sony was about to give us another accessibility hit. So, did they deliver and make the most accessible God of War ever? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Steve Saylor, an accessibility advocate and consultant in the video game industry, and I'm also blind. If you're wondering how I can play video games if I'm blind, check out the video here or click the link in the description down below. While you're down there, click the like and subscribe button to help keep this channel growing. I try to release videos regularly, and every little click counts. So, I have to start this off by saying I have rolled credits on this game. Now, this may sound like a throwaway statement to make, but to me, that is rare for me to say. As an example, it's like you trying to get a platinum trophy in any Souls game. That's how big of a deal this is for me. The reason why it's rare is not necessarily because I didn't enjoy a game, but mostly because I couldn't or barely able to play it for accessible reasons. When I rolled credits on 2018's God of War, it took me several weeks and many long, agonizing hours to finish. It was a struggle, but I enjoyed the story enough to plow through despite my disability getting in the way. Ragnarok is different. Ragnarok is good. Ragnarok's accessibility is good, and so close to being great. Let me explain. Let's go over options first. There is a lot here, like the Last of Us 2 level of options, from presets to text size to high contrast modes to directional subtitles and full captions to audio cues to full remapping, etc, etc. But with those options, in many cases, they improved on it. Like the presets, for example, you can turn them on full, which enables all settings tagged with a specific disability like vision, hearing, or motor, but you can also set the preset to having some of the settings turned on if you only needed a few of the basic standard settings on. For blind and low vision, there's high contrast HUD that adds a black shadow behind HUD elements. There's a very familiar high contrast mode, but with customization options that we saw in Insomniac games, where you can change the colors of everything from allies, enemies, friendlies, and different enemy colors signifying a mini boss or a regular enemy. But in Ragnarok, they took it a step further. They did what I actually hoped The Last of Us 2 would do and added a ton of depth and a bit of a hybrid color and black and white to the world, so you can still see more of the environments and details of the character and object models. You can see more details of Kratos' armor than just a flat 2D looking highlight. Even the way the lighting in this game looks with high contrast mode on is really cool. Now, while some areas can be hard to see in the dark with almost zero light, that's something I hope can be tweaked / updated to improve later on after release. Now, let's also talk text size, because this was one of my biggest accessibility hurdles in the original God of War. And not only did they change the default font size to an actual decent size, you can set all text, and I mean all text, to as high as extra large. Now, it's not as super large as I've seen in other games, but believe me, this is a massive improvement over the original game. And let me tell you, it made this game a much more enjoyable experience than pretty much most games even released today. There's a thing when I'm playing a game where I'm actively having to try to focus on a game and either reading text, searching for icons, or whichever. And my eyes will get extremely fatigued really quickly to the point where after a few hours, my eyes will begin to hurt and I can't look at any screen for a long time. Whenever a game like Ragnarok can add even just an extra large setting for all text and also have large icons, I can passively focus on just the game itself without my disability getting in the way. I have had longer and longer play sessions than I've had in the past playing this than I have in a very long time. To round out more quality of life improvements, by the way, in just the blind category alone, there is auto pickup, an audio cue library that has the same sound effects as The Last of Us 2 with its button prompts, a ledge guard, traversal assist, aim assist, and more. There are some issues, however, I do need to address. While this game will be amazing for low vision players, gamers without sight might have difficulty with some things, such as there is menu narration, but very minimal in-game menu narration for the map, skills tree, armor, weapons, etc. There is screen reading for the tutorials on those menus when the game requires you to upgrade a weapon or teaches you a new mechanic in those menus, but that's about it. You'll hear
screen reader is unavailable in this menu
a lot. Also, there is navigational assistance, but it's not as intuitive or as breadcrumb-y, to use a weird term, like The Last of Us 2 does. When activated by pushing R3, the camera will point to where you need to go. However, it doesn't fully lead you on a path to get there. In the more linear levels, this was fine, as there generally was only one path to follow with some variations on direction, but it all led to the same waypoint. When the game goes into the semi-open world of each realm, which is roughly about after 4 or 5 hours of starting the game, that's when the nav assistance gets a little finicky. It does direct to wherever you have a tracked waypoint on the map, but sometimes the game seems to want to lead you back to the main story or to a mystic gateway instead. Or the nav assist will point you to a wall, but in reality it's trying to point to something beyond it that you have to find a path to get to around the wall, and the nav assist isn't able to do that. Also, unlike The Last of Us 2, there is no audio cue for when you get to a specific waypoint or breadcrumb, nor is there an arrow pointing to where you should go. This is, full disclosure, a very, very, very tough thing to do in an open world when the player's choices are dynamic and infinite. No studio has ever attempted this in an open world game, so designing a navigational assist system that tries to update behind the scenes in relation to where the player wants to go and where they should go is a constant AI nightmare. In The Last of Us 2, it's mostly a golden path, and Naughty Dog can set as many breadcrumbs as they want along that path, but even in the larger area of Seattle, this was difficult to do for Naughty Dog, and Seattle was much smaller in scale in comparison to the larger maps of all 9 realms you visit in Ragnarok. So while this system does work some of the time, it will need some updates and player feedback to adjust on what the studio couldn't test for. Think of this as a Nav Assist 1.5, with Naughty Dog showing it can be done and Sony Santa Monica attempting this on a larger scale. So please, if you use navigational assistance or any of the accessibility for that matter and have trouble, the studio is open to feedback from players, so let them know you'd like to get in touch and they're willing to listen. And that is just for the blind accessibility, by the way. So let's jump into the other disabilities and see what they have. For deaf and hard of hearing players, there are subtitle options, including adding a directional arrow pointing to where off camera the character that's speaking is in relation to the camera. There's also full captions that describe not only sound effects, which also have directional arrows to where the sound is coming from as well. They also went as far as describing the mood and style of music that's playing from moment to moment. There are some dialogue in game that can be tough to concentrate on while in combat, where characters can provide useful information like, but by the time you notice it, it might be too late to dodge out of the way before an attack hits you from behind. The subtitles are actually placed really high above the bottom, so it is more closer to your peripheral vision than most games that place subtitles at the very bottom of the screen. So this is more of a disability spectrum where it may be uncomfortable for some and fine for others. There are also visualizations for any of the off-camera attacks that has a scale from yellow to red that shows how imminent danger is, while also pointing to anywhere off-camera that danger is coming from. For motor disabilities, like I mentioned, there are full remapping of the controller. You can remap multiple configurations, including control schemes for left or right-handed, classic or modern controls, or have 3 separate custom remapping profiles. I actually did this to swap dodge and interact to circle and X and vice versa, because that felt a little bit more comfortable for me. And once I did that, the game just made it a little bit easier to be able to play. But also as well, you have to keep in mind that you are using every button on the controller, and that can still be a little bit of a motor disability nightmare, because you are still having to be able to try to hit every single button, especially in combat. Moving on, there's traversal assist that auto climbs all obstacles and will automatically jump from ledges as long as you point the camera in the direction of where to jump. I mentioned auto pickup for blind players, but this also helps for motor disabilities as well, because you can eliminate a multiple button push situation where you're constantly hitting the interact button to pick up crucial items such as health, rage, hack silver, etc. And let me tell you, in combat, for the bosses or any intense multiple enemy situation, being able to have the game auto pick up health at that precise crucial moment has saved me many a death, and believe me, it made the game a little bit more comfortable to play. I should mention that while the game's combat is more refined than the last game, it still can have issues with a lot happening in combat, and precision timing is key for some of the larger, beefier enemies. I get it, you have to have the same combat be familiar to returning players, but also give them something new at the same time, but that can be a challenge accessibility-wise. There were a few times where I would hit parry to have it succeed, and then having to immediately attempt to parry 1 or 2 times afterwards, and not being fast enough to parry successfully, or having a parry immediately be followed up with an undodgeable attack, and you can't react fast enough in time to get out of the way. There were even a few times where I tried to dodge out of one of those attacks, and the area effect was so large, a single dodge roll couldn't suffice. Technically, even 2 dodge rolls couldn't even help sometimes, and I had to resort to literally sprinting away just to escape. And when sometimes the animations for some of the actions kind of take over, you can't be able to hit the button in time in order to be able to escape any of the undodgeable attacks, and that can be an issue, especially when it takes a huge amount of your health. Also, as well, as the game progresses, there are new combat mechanics that are introduced, some even in the latter parts of the game, that provide a lot of combat variety and makes a player feel more like they have a power of a god. But as players have to adjust anytime there is a new mechanic, that can be a lot, not only for motor disabilities, but cognitive and blindness as well, especially if there are multiple enemy types that require different mechanics for each type. It can get a lot real fast. Even on Give Me Grace, the game difficulty just above Give Me Story, which is kind of considered the easiest difficulty level, there were combat scenarios where it was taking multiple tries to get through. There are also smaller quality of life updates that do help everyone, such as if you go into the settings and change any of the huge amount of options available, if you change any setting that is not on by default, the setting will be highlighted in blue, so you always know which options you've changed and which you never touched or had set to the default. Honestly, actually more games need to do this, because there are many times I'll go in and try to find a setting that I can't seem to find, and having that highlight helped so much, being able to not get lost in just the sea of options that are available in the settings menu. Motion reduction, including reducing the camera sway and shake that the one-shot camera the 2018 game had introduced, that can cause some motion sickness, is also adjustable as well. Also, now, this is huge. There is a checkpoint boss battle option where if you are in any boss battle and you can get the health down to at least halfway, the game will set that as a checkpoint, and when you respawn, it will start the enemy health at that point. That way you don't have to start the boss battle all over again at full health. We need this feature more in games, people. Please, I beg of you. This not only benefits those with disabilities, but I can guarantee anyone who is watching this right now who is not even disabled would want this feature, because how often are we fighting bosses only to get a quarter health left and then die only to have to start that boss all over again? If there ever was a need for a standard option for games, I would put this in the top 10 easy. I could rave and rant about this all day, but you know what? Okay, I need to get back into the review. Now, if you got this far into the review, thank you. Also, hi Mila and Sam. I know you're watching. Hi. But I wanted to say that there will be a lot of us that will compare Ragnarok to The Last of Us 2. Not only in the accessibility community, but just people in general. With its accessibility and close proximity to Naughty Dog and it being a PlayStation Studio title, I can honestly see why people would want to compare it to The Last of Us 2. But honestly, comparing it should only be the beginning, because there are some things in here that the team did add that surpass what Naughty Dog did, and some that didn't. It doesn't mean that this game isn't accessible either, because it didn't hit that high bar in some areas that The Last of Us 2 did. It just shows how wide-reaching accessibility is, and this game will now make it so a ton of new players can pick up a Leviathan axe for the first time and feel what it means to be a god of war. And that's phenomenal. That's the nature of the game that matters, and not just the form. I give God of War Ragnarok a 4 out of 5.